The Joe Rogan Experience.
We definitely go down a bunch of different rabbit holes. Like we did, we've had a lot of like some of the protein researchers come on and talk about some of that stuff, like Dr. Stu Phillips or Professor Stu Phillips, Professor Don Lehman, Professor Jose Antonio.
What do you mean by protein stuff? Like different qualities of protein?
Yeah, they're doing like the protein research. They're kind of the guys who are doing some of the more recent research and looking at like, well, what are our protein needs across like a variety of ages, as well as when you introduce athletics, and then like what is the quality versus, or like I guess maybe the best way to look at it is like the bioavailability of different protein sources and things like that. And I think there's it seems like something that we'd have figured out already, but there's I guess some nuance with that even, and now they're saying that there's probably reason to believe that our recommendations should be higher than what they have been historically, especially for athletes and elderly folks. And
you mean the RDA?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The RDA, as it currently stands, is basically just to prevent disease, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that. And I think they maybe are learning more too about just kind of what role protein plays in bone health too, as opposed to just because people think of protein as just this building block for muscle, but there's a lot that goes into it with bone health as well. So those guys were really interesting to hear about. And we've done a lot of stuff with ranchers and some of the savory Salatin folks come on the show and talk about kind of that practice versus kind of your standard agricultural production methods and things like that.
Savory Salatin? You mean Joel Salatin?
Mm-hmm.
What is savory? What do you mean?
Oh, like Alan Savory. So
okay.
We've had Alan Savory, Joel Salatin, Will Harris from White Oak Pastures on, Bobby Gill, he's part of the Savory Institute. Come on and just kind of share with us like kind of where that stuff is at, because I think there's a lot of guesswork and unanswerable questions at this point with some of that stuff, because we're projecting like way down the road with some of this stuff.
Are you talking about the difference between grain-fed versus grass-fed meat?
Yeah, and most specifically with those guys too, just like kind of what it's doing to the soil health and the soil quality. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I've learned that was interesting was that, we kind of start to like throw a lot of these different like quote unquote regenerative type practices into one like bucket or one category, when in reality there's a lot of different variants within them. So someone can say like, oh, regenerative agriculture is going to save the planet, and then someone will go dig up a bunch of studies that show like, well, no, it actually doesn't do anything. And then like,
I'm confused in that, because Chris Kresser is all in on this regenerative agricultural thing. Mm-hmm. But is there real evidence that you can have a zero carbon gain?
Yeah, I mean, it's
because that's the net positive. The idea is that if you use regenerative agriculture, meaning the animals graze, you're not talking monocrop environments, that these cows graze on open fields of grass, and then they shit all over the place, and then that shit becomes manure, and that this actually helps the plant life grow, and all this stuff sort of, it all becomes a part of a cycle. And that this regenerative practice is actually, instead of raising the carbon footprint, it actually makes a carbon neutral footprint.
Yeah. And I think where sometimes it gets confusing is if you go and you just look at studies on regenerative agriculture, you get a lot of mixed information. So what I was told, and I'm still kind of going down this rabbit hole, and the way I like to look at all these type of things is I try to like look at one side of the story and then look to the other side and see where the counters are to that, and just kind of go back and forth until you hit a dead end. And then, if you hit a dead end, like that's where you're at for now until something else gets introduced. And where I got to now is, I think it was maybe Will Harris told us this, that when you're looking for these studies on kind of what practice is going to be good in terms of like soil regeneration, you have to look up adaptive multi-paddock grazing. Because if you look up like holistic or regenerative agriculture, you're just going to get a whole mess of like different ranges or different types of it. And some are effective, some aren't. So it's really hard to kind of piece out, who's got the accurate stuff and not. And I mean, I think ultimately some of this stuff is we just don't know yet.
What was the one that's most, what did you just say?
Adaptive multi-paddock grazing.
And what does that mean?
It just means like instead of it's a rotational grazing from what I understand, but you're kind of moving the herd along to these different paddocks, and then they're like, they're doing their thing in what would you consider like a natural way, like it would have been before we came in and shot all the buffalo and all that stuff. And then they're rotating it. So the way I've understood it, like the more of those paddocks you can get, the better, because then you're letting the soil and the everything in there like really heal and develop that deep root system, as well as some of that microbiome, like all the insects and things that would be in there,
Right.
and all that stuff.
So you would need massive amounts of land and massive amounts of areas for them to graze.
I think you would need. I think the more the better is probably the way to look at it, but. Hopefully the soil biologists aren't cringing.
They must
right
be
now.
cringing.
Yeah.
I'm sure they are, and we apologize in advance. But like
the interesting thing though is like, I mean, I think there's a lot of work to be done in looking into this and finding out the best way to maybe utilize it. But the part that I thought was really interesting is with the Will Harris white oak pastures thing. I think this study is maybe overutilized by like the pro regenerative or multi-paddock group to a degree, because it's what they have.
And it's what they're looking for. They're looking for a specific
Right.
answer, meaning this is good. This is the way. We found a way where you can eat meat and not feel bad.
Yeah, and the thing that's compelling about that study to me is the way it kind of happened. Was essentially what happened was Will Harris and White Oak Pastures, they were raising animals for Epic Bar, like that was one of their buyers.
Oh, okay.
And Epic Bar got acquired by I think it was General Mills, and so General Mills looked at what Epic Bar was claiming when they were the independent, and they were saying like our stuff is regenerative. Ours, you buy our product and you're giving back versus taking, kind of a mindset. And I think General Mills was skeptical about that, so they spent, I think it was like $80,000 to go in and have a study done on Will Harris's White Oaks pasture to really see if they could back that claim up. And they went in and they did the study, and it actually showed like a net carbon sequestration versus, like, they weren't even neutral. They actually pulled in more than they put out.
So this is from Epic's particular type of farming that they utilize.
At least at White Oaks pasture.
Okay.
So, I mean, again, that's one specific situation or one specific environment or area. So I think where people run into maybe a potential problem is, can we extrapolate that forward to other areas? Are we going to get that same result, or is it going to be different?
Right. That's what's important it really is important to look at that honestly, because even though you do have this one area, is that because of the environment where this farm is taking place? Is it because of the particular soil quality? Like, what are the factors that allow them to have? So it actually takes carbon out of the atmosphere, like a certain percentage. So instead of adding carbon, it actually removes some.
Yeah, because I guess the way it was described to me is that the inputs of that type of system are so low that like you're not like, because if you look at just a normal like agricultural setup, you have all these inputs of like manure and all these other things that are going to add to that net effect, or that net negative effect of animal agriculture. So when you reduce the inputs down to next to nothing, because your inputs are all kind of just manpower, where you're moving these things around and letting the natural course of things happen over time, that's where you can maybe minimize some of these, like, I guess what you maybe call like a tertiary damage of animal agriculture. But I think we probably have a lot to learn and stuff with that stuff too. But it's one of those things, when I think about it, it's like hopefully we're spending a lot of time looking at that stuff, because if they're right about the number of harvests we have left, I think, what are they estimating? We have like 60 harvests left. I mean, clearly, regardless of whether you're vegan, carnivore, or somewhere in between, we need quality soil, right?
Right.
I mean,
what about hydroponic? Because I know that there are some large-scale hydroponic operations that are growing vegetables and things along those lines, and some people think that there's real promise in that, because you're not using soil at all. You're not you're not devastating the already depleted ground soil, and you also don't need to do all the harmful things that are involved in monocrop agriculture, right? Like the devastation on the wildlife, the displacement of wildlife, pesticides, combines that are indiscriminately chewing up small rodents and bugs and rabbits and anything else that gets caught in their blades.
Yeah. That'd be interesting. I don't know a whole lot about it other than what it is. So, I mean, I'm all for solutions.
Yeah, somebody sent me a link to something that some indication that there might be some promise in hydroponic agriculture. But the thing about this whole idea, what was the name of the farm where that this was done, where there's
the White Oak Pastures.
White Oak Pastures. Is that sustainable, like, nationally? Forget about globally, but even nationally, in terms of like the needs? that people have for beef? I mean, we use so much beef in this country.
Yeah, I don't know for sure like what the scalability of that would
Right.
be. My guess is like at this point it would be because it's pretty small, like even from a percentage standpoint of what is being or like how much of that type of process is being used. It's like a single percentage or something like that. So.
Well, all grass-fed meat, right? All grass-fed
Yeah.
meat is like less than 3%.
Yeah, so it seems like we'd have a long ways to go. But I mean, I guess the counter to that would also be we're essentially going back to what we would have been doing historically. And so it's not necessarily like reinventing the wheel as much as it is just saying, okay, what we did here obviously is not sustainable or potentially not sustainable. So let's look at, well, what did we do to get back to where we were before? I guess
Right.
maybe is the way to look at that. But